Speech Pitch by Iska Sak.
Hi there, and welcome back to Speech Pitch by Iska Sak. I'm Pascal.
And I'm Spyretta Leivaditi, and we will be your hosts for this episode. Today, we are very happy to have Erich Reiter and Lukas Latacz from TiDF Labs, a company that creates voice-controlled video games for speech therapy. Welcome to Speech Pitch, Erich and Lukas.
Great, thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to be here.
So before diving into TiDF Labs, we are curious to hear about your two respective academic and non-academic backgrounds and what led you to found the company. Could you please briefly give an outline on your career journey? Let's start with Lukas.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a computer science engineer. And so after doing my master's, I started a PhD. And actually the first project I worked on was already about using speech technology for people with speech impairments and to use that technology also in education. And that was a really long time ago already. So nowadays the topic is more popular in academia. It's still a niche topic, let's say, but it's gaining more and more traction. But that was a very interesting project. So we tried many things. Typically it didn't work that well, to be honest. And my task was I was working on text-to-speech, so that was also the topic of my PhD thesis, and I built a text-to-speech system for Dutch. And so also during my academic career, I continue to work with speech therapists. And so after finishing my PhD, I was thinking, okay, let's do something more with the knowledge that I gained and start up a company. But it took some time actually, so. Also did a postdoc afterwards, and the idea was then to gain more knowledge about starting a company, and then during that time I also met Erich. Then we started TiDF Labs basically.
All right, well, I'll take over. Thanks, Lukas. Yeah, it was great when we met. I started a little bit, we had a very different journey. I started studying computer science and linguistics back in Montreal, and then I eventually did a master's in computational linguistics, combining the two. I was so excited about the idea of speech recognition technology. I had this professor who's told us it's going to be the future, and I focused on algorithms that were really specific to speech recognition, and then I landed one of my dream jobs out in California in Silicon Valley at a company called Nuance. Nuance was still a really young company back in 2004, and it was the original makers of Siri. So it was really cool to be part of a team that was going to be launching something that would become a ubiquitous system around the world. So I stayed at Nuance for 10 years. Some 7 years into that career, I had an eye awakening. A close friend of mine had a diagnosis of ALS. And then a couple of years later, Chris just couldn't talk anymore. He was restricted to a wheelchair, and specifically to something called an AAC device, or an alternative and augmented communication device, similar to what Stephen Hawking used to use. But it was laborious for him to use. And I remember the day it took him 3 minutes to say, I need water. It just took him forever to do anything. And eventually he became kind of ignored. And it broke my heart to have seen a guy evolve or disevolve from being such a vivacious and gregarious and strong guy to sort of succumbing to this horrible disease. So I took a leap of faith, and I quit everything, and I became a speech therapist. I left and went back to school. I studied speech therapy, and the idea was I really wanted to create some sort of technology for people with speech disorders like my friend Chris. And what I did not know at the time was just how many people around the world have some sort of communication disorder. So along the way, Lukas and I met, and as Lukas said, we started TiDF Labs, and that was back in 2019.
Oh, cool. Thanks a lot for your outlines. And that's quite some time, of course. And it would be very interesting to see then how exactly you actually met and how you agreed on starting TiDF Labs, and what is basically the origin of the company there.
Yeah, no, I was doing a fellowship in Texas, in Austin, Texas, and Lukas and I were communicating. I had met him in person, while I was living in Texas. I'd gone back to Belgium for a visit because things were getting more and more serious between our ambitions with the company. So it's also with a 7-hour time difference, it was getting a little bit challenging. So I thought it made more sense for one of us to step up and move, to get closer together. So I left, came back to Belgium. I had been here before already. And it just made a lot more sense to start together, where we could be hyper or laser focused, sitting together, which we did almost every day. And you need a lot of that. You need to create inertia. You need momentum. And it's hard to do it if you've got a time zone difference, for one. And I think just that logic tells you, hey, if we start together, we can maybe, it's not 1 + 1 is 2, maybe 1 + 1 can be 3 or 4, or, with the intensity that we had in mind, it just made sense to try. Because if you don't try, you'll just never know. You'll never get anywhere.
Yeah, but some crazy commitment, I guess, especially coming from the States then and deciding to move, like at least for the time for founding the company, to Belgium. That's a big step. And I'd be also interested then in what major challenges in general you faced right at the beginning when you decided to launch it, and how you overcame them, maybe like as an inspirational story.
Yeah, one of the challenges. So I still had some funding when Erich actually came to Belgium. So then we decided to also make use of that money, or because we also had some budget on that project to do some interesting things. So we that were later than useful for our company, because it was, so the grant that I got was and sometimes you have there are special grants to encourage researchers to go to industry or to create their own company or to collaborate with industry. So it was a grant like that, and one of the challenges that we also faced was not only was partly to raise some money, actually, to hire people, for example, to work on the product. And secondly, we also had some challenges with creating a spin-off company. I think Erich can.
It's true, and probably it's one of the pain points. It's just how unvanilla it is to go from a spin-off to a company, at least in Belgium. I know, coming from U.S. universities, normally there's a template. It's very standard, and in Belgium, to my surprise, it's not. So, that took a lot. It took almost a year to actually create the company from the time we decided we wanted to do it, simply because the negotiations with universities are difficult, they're challenging. But okay, that's part of the deal, as you go, that's part of it. But, very, very soon after we got the spinoff, we raised funds, we won an innovation grant, and we found angel investors, and we were off to the races. So, it turned out from a challenge to something great. And I think that if you start a company, it's constantly going to be a bunch of hills and, ups and downs and, valleys and peaks. And it's constantly like that. You have days where throughout these 5 years, you have days where you're just really on top of the world, and days where you're like, oh, shoot, how are we going to swim out of this one? And this was just maybe the first lesson that we learned, is that, okay, it's part of the game. And at the end of the day, you're the guy whose back is against the wall, and you've got to fight for the things that you want and the things that you believe in. And it's an amazing lesson. So it was okay. It all worked out so far.
How did it go for you? How did you secure funding for the startup? Were there specific strategies that worked well for you?
I think, make Google's your friend. We started in an accelerator, and at the accelerator, we connected with other companies who were also in the same boat as us, looking for fundraising, having these side conversations, so important. We eventually met our first angel investors through one of our business coaches. And, I think part of, the company is not only the tech that we're developing, but it's also been a little bit commercial, knowing that, hey, if you don't have the funds, you have to be aggressive and seek that and convince people. And I think, for Lukas and I, we don't often celebrate our victories, but every now and then we'll do one. And it was the first time we had a little toast to each other when we first secured our first small pot of gold. But you have to be diligent, self-belief. All of these things come with the territory, so.
And I think it's also interesting that Erich mentioned accelerator programs, because that also helped us. So we participated in a few programs, and you not only get some extra background knowledge, but you also meet other entrepreneurs and other people. And so that's quite interesting to learn from each other, learn from mistakes that people made and so on, and also good things, obviously. But I think that's very, very important, actually, when you start up a company.
Oh, so now we can move actually our focus to your company itself. So TiDF. Could you also tell us in your own words, for our audience, what TiDF Labs does and what products do you offer?
So in general, we combine artificial intelligence with speech therapy, and we combine the two to make a series of products. The majority of the products that we develop are video games, so speech activated or voice speech recognition based video games. But we also have other products that we are creating for people with Parkinson's disease, for example, which are not in the form of a video game. But the idea essentially is the same, where we're combining what we know of AI and what we know about speech therapy to create something that can be productive for people with any form of communication disorder.
Actually, your first game app is Stutter Stars, right? An app that it's for people who are stuttering, and for our audience, stuttering is the involuntary repetition and prolongation of sounds, syllables, words, phrases. Would you like to give like a short description of the game, like the levels, what the player has to go through?
Yeah, I'll just correct you a little bit. That's one of the definitions, but it's not the full picture. And I think Stutter Stars it's important for stuttering in particular. If they once said in speech therapy school that if you understand stuttering, you understand everything about speech therapy, because it's really like neurologically very, very complex. Yeah, so Lukas and I, we were in touch with a couple of people like Dr. Susie Fosnot or Dr. Francis Freeman. Susie at the time was one of the executive members of the American Board of Fluency and Fluency Disorders, which is basically one of the gatekeepers of stuttering research. And we were able to do some early tests early on at a place called Camp Shoutout, which was hosted by a woman named Kristen Camilla, and she was the president of the American Board of Fluency and Fluency Disorders at the time. And throughout our journey, what we were experiencing were deep connections with these fluency specialists. And when we were talking to them, we would learn very quickly the types of things that they would do in their therapy. So we amassed a series of information that these top stuttering specialists would do with their clients when they were working on some of the motor aspects of speech. So the two main schools of thought for stuttering is acceptance and motor speech. Acceptance is basically let's accept, and either you can accept your speech the way it is, and you can either do something about it or you cannot do something about it. And the world that I share, these two worlds should coexist. You should be able to accept your stutter, but at the same time, you should be able to work on it if you want to. And what we created then in Stutter Stars is this amalgamation of all of these ideas that the fluency specialists, they do in their practice, and we put them into a video game. So we work on things like not only the interruptions of the speeches of speech, so if you have a block or a prolongation or a partial word repetition, but we also work on things like prosody. Prosody is the naturalness of speech, like stress or pitch changes or loudness or rhythm, for example. And then we also work on things like mindfulness. So we put together things like fluency shaping, prosody, mindfulness, all in a game. And those are the therapy techniques we actually create in a game, which is an extremely powerful series of techniques if one who stutters would like to work on improving their own fluency. But what we did is, in addition to creating or knowing that these are the techniques we want to work on, we packaged it in a video game. So the video game Stutter Stars, which is the fun part, it's about this horse named Zumi who loses his voice. And it's a journey of Zumi trying to get his voice back. And it's he goes from one island to another island to another island, and each island represents a distinct fluency technique. Each island also contains one character. Each character is a different shape, is a different form. We're trying to reflect, old characters, young characters, flexible characters, athletic characters, a whole spectrum, so that you can have some relatability to some of the characters. Maybe you yourself are a sporty guy, or maybe you yourself are a foodie. So, whatever it is, you want to have some sort of relatability and practice. And there is this whole saying that if you tell a child to be quiet, they might be quiet for a couple of seconds. But if you tell a child to pretend that they're a soldier, you can get them to be quiet for significantly longer. So if you get into this play-based mindset of a child, and you allow them to be the character which they are in this game, then what's happening is you get the intersection of a multitude of worlds. First, you're playing a video game. Second, you're using your voice. And if you combine those, what you're getting is intensive speech therapy, which is the ideal type of situation. That's sort of the creation of Stutter Stars. That's what it's supposed to represent.
And actually, how often should a player practice? And will you notice immediate, like maybe the therapist will notice improvements through the game? Like, does the game goes well with, let's say, an organized treatment from a therapist, from a speech therapist, I mean?
So we don't know the exact answer to that question, but what we do know is that we lean on research that was done prior to us, so in other domains. So other domains related to speech therapy. So for example, in stroke rehabilitation or in dyslexia or also in ADHD, that work has already been done. And what people generally say is that you should practice every single day for at least 15 minutes, that's 1-5, and after about 6 to 8 weeks, you should start seeing neural changes happening in the brain. And that's the whole point of neuroplasticity, is that if you want to get good at anything, you'll need repeated practice, but you don't see the change from one day to the next. It's like going to the gym. You feel strong the next day, but it's because your muscles are aching, but changes really do take time. And this isn't any different for speech therapy, except that we're offering it in an intensive way. So intensive practice was shown in those other disciplines, and now we're kind of piggybacking off of previous research and just applying it now to stuttering.
Along that line, I would be very interested in how you validated Stutter Stars clinically, if you did, or if there are some regulatory measures, especially in the EU, if you can sell it as a medical product or prescribe it as a product, or how the status is there. Because what you say, I mean, this sounds very well funded, based in science, especially neuroplasticity and being very important. So is there some research that you did there, some validation?
Yeah, so during the development of Stutter Stars, we conducted several small experiments to validate that it works, and we continuously monitor how things are working. So for example, when we started, we did a small study at Camp Shoutout with the first demo, and then one year later we did another small study with the first real version of Stutter Stars. So we tested it in a controlled environment, and then we did some more tests, and we continue to do that. We haven't published the results yet. Currently, we are collaborating with my former university where I did my PhD. So with Vrije Universiteit Brussel in Brussels, and also the University of Western Cape in Cape Town in South Africa, and we will do a research study to see how. Well, we are actually now conducting a research study to see how well Stutter Stars can be used in remote areas in South Africa.
Wow.
And we are also collaborating, maybe Eric can tell something about that. There's a collaboration going on about rhythm with University of Michigan, or is it University of, I always forget what is the exact
Well, it's actually both. It's with the University of Michigan and partially with Michigan State. And there we're doing some more neurological research, independent research on the effects of rhythm and stuttering. But that'll be, to Lukas's point, we try to validate everything that we do. Everything that we started based on what the most recent science talks about. So, for example, this always baffles me that people don't know why they stutter. People say, "Oh, why do I stutter?" We say, "Okay, let's take a step back. It's a neurological disorder. So, okay, the brain's complicated. Let's look into the brain. Why do we stutter?" So, there's Lukas and I presented our work at Oxford Dysfluency Congress, our conference, which is normally regarded as the most prestigious academic conference in the world for stuttering, and when we presented in 2020, the keynote speakers were talking about their neurological findings on what happens in the brain when we stutter, pinpointing to an area of the brain called the striatum, which is the area of the brain that's responsible for speech timing, speech initiation, and speech rhythm. So if you have a lesion at that level of the brain, you will stutter. And this is interesting for us to learn about. So if we can understand, where it happens, what is the point of the stridum, and what can you do about it, that's always our starting point. So we do the same thing for not only stuttering, but for the other areas of speech disorders like in articulation or Parkinson's. We have to understand the epicenter of the problem, so to speak. But yeah, so we always go from there, and then we branch out.
And one small question also regarding Stutter Stars is that it's currently available in English, if I see it right. Did you experiment around also with other languages, or do you try to port it to other regions in the sense?
Yes, so we already have a Dutch acoustic model which is ready to be included in the game. But it takes some time actually. So it's to translate stuff. We are planning to release Stutter Stars in different languages. The first language, after English, will be Dutch, and we also are working, for example, on Portuguese. So we're training a new Portuguese acoustic model, could be used in Stutter Stars, and then other languages will follow.
Super cool. I mean, this sounds like really top notch then, and super convenient, as you said, like as a big pain point in the lives of these patients. And I guess just from a technical perspective, looking from outside, like you have Stutter Stars and you have this Parkinson stuff, I guess it would be based then on similar models that you already have at hand and that you could then just adapt to that use case. Or is it a completely different new endeavor and research project?
Yeah, part of it is the same, but not everything. Yeah. There are also some things that are not in Stutter Stars that we have available that we then use for the Parkinson glasses. For example, like a speech rate detector. In Stutter Stars, we use a different speech rate detector actually based on the ASR model. But for the smart glasses, we have something. Yeah, that's basically language independent.
Actually, I have a question on that because I was thinking that there might be different severity levels of Parkinson, and how do you believe that product will be affected by that?
Yeah, so this is not a product for everybody. For all people with Parkinson's. That's the first thing to realize. If you look at people with Parkinson, typically maybe Erich can explain it a bit better. that there are different phases of Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, it's true. And to Lucas's point, there's different phases. There's 5 phases of Parkinson's, and generally speaking, what happens in phase 1 is people start noticing these tremors in their fingers or their foot or something. And they might get this diagnosis eventually, and they'll take some pharmacological solution, normally in the form of something called levodopa. And levodopa is really good at inhibiting or basically continuing to produce dopamine from a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. That's great, and that works well. But for speech, that doesn't help. It's a totally different system. So in these 5 phases of Parkinson's, people start noticing a diminished speech in what's called phase 2, or what's called the long phase. The long phase is usually 5 to 10 years. Typically it's 5, but it's nowadays with better medications, it gets extended more towards 10. And it's normally in this phase 2, which is that 5 to 10 year space or window, that we try to really help people with Parkinsonian speech. So you have to look at it holistically in what is the disease, where are the problems that you see, and how can you affect people in one way or another, how can you support them. And we look at it like, imagine that levodopa helps with the tremor. Imagine you have some sort of glasses that can help with your speech. You might gain an entire decade of mobility and speech where you previously wouldn't. And that's how we look at it.
Oh, very cool and very interesting, background also for Parkinson's disease. And as you said, interesting way to find the linkage point or the leverage point to tackle then this respective disorder. And so for this particular project, as you said, it's not a product yet, right? Or it's maybe only for this specific patients in phase 2. So do you plan to commercialize it as a product? Is it still just a research project?
Yeah, we're not really a research project. It's more like a development project. So we are developing the product itself. There are still some technical challenges. So it's especially in with multiple speakers, obviously, and in loud environments. It's not so easy. But the idea is to bring that product actually to the market. So we got funding to work on this. So we got EU subsidies and also local subsidies here in Belgium to support this project. And with this funding, we are also able to test the glasses actually with actual people with Parkinson's disease.
Oh, very cool. And do you have also clinical partners to collaborate with?
So we work together with speech therapists various hospitals in Belgium and the Netherlands.
Let's move on to a more like a part of our podcast where it's like a more advice to the next generations, let's call it. For those in our audience interested in social impact tech or tackling healthcare issues, what advice would you give on starting and sustaining a meaningful business?
That's a really good question. How? When you start a company, at least, and Lukas and I know I can speak on behalf of him as I say this, you create a company and it becomes your baby. And I have 2 human babies at home, and it's hard. It's really hard because I don't consider Say It Labs my job. I consider it also as my passion. And it is a hard thing to do. And I certainly am not perfect at getting the right balance because I work probably 7 days a week. When when summer vacation comes and the kids are not in school, I feel bad because I want to work more, and it's hard. So it's not an easy thing to get to. It's sort of like, people always, vacation's important, and we do take our vacations, and it's also our reminders that you have to take a break. But I think, maturity and having people like Lukas around us who are great soundboards, surround yourself with people who are like-minded and recognize that you shouldn't feel guilty for one thing for taking a day off or taking a week off. You should not feel guilty for that when you work so hard. And I think it's great to surround yourself with like-minded people who kind of give you that freedom to say, hey, it's okay to take a step back, spend time with your children, spend time with your family, go and have a beer, go and do something that quote unquote normal people do because and you kind of forget it because, if it would be my wish, I'd have 30 hours in a day.
I don't know, of course, how old your children are, but would you like introduce them to your products, like Stutter Stars, play with them? Would you feel like cool? Hey, look what cool things I do when I'm not playing with you. I am designing this so we can play together. Or I don't know.
One of the voices in Stutter Stars is my son.
Nice.
So I definitely got him in early. Susie gave us the great term, I'll thank her for it, which is called junior faculty. And, my daughter, who's 4, she's definitely an amazing faculty member. And she's so good at, if we bring something in prototype and I see her playing it, then I know we're onto something cool. My son, on career day, what do your parents do? Says, yeah, my dad makes video games and he feels like champion of the world. I mean, it's cool, So we definitely, he thinks that it's jackpot stuff.
Yeah, we're almost at the end. We have this one small section where we ask our guests to come up with another question for the next guest. So our previous guest, Tituan Pakole, was asking you, what is right now and for the next few years the biggest challenge to overcome so that your solution, like your products, will work?
I'll take a first stab at it, and Lukas, I'll give you some time to think about a better answer. But, the hardest thing for us is that acoustic models for people with speech disorders are very limited. And staying ahead of that curve and being able to continuously create these models out of nothing, out of our own data, has been the biggest challenge from the onset. And I think continuing to evolve that, and that's always challenging.
Yeah, I think definitely having more annotated data and good data is quite important for us and for other people.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Erich and Lukas. It was such a fun discussion we had together today.
Thank you, Spyretta and Pascal, for having us. It's been great being here.
It was very nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Also from my side. Thanks so much. And of course to audience, thanks a lot for listening, and stay tuned for future episodes of Speech Pitch, where we might interview your favorite speech researchers and entrepreneurs. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcasts, and also follow the ISCA-SEC on X and LinkedIn, where we share our latest news with you.
Speech Pitch by ISCA-SEC.